Welcome back to Talk Tickers. We're ready to jump into another earnings call deep dive. And today we're taking a close look at ExxonMobil.
ExxonMobil's Q4 2024 report.
Yeah. So, to set the stage a little, it's earnings season, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ExxonMobil, well, they just dropped some pretty big numbers.
They did, yeah.
Earnings came in at $34 billion for 2024.
Their third highest in a decade.
Wow. Third highest in a decade. And on top of that, $55 billion in cash flow from operations.
That's right.
Now, those are some serious numbers, especially when we keep hearing about softer market conditions. So what were some of the things that really drove this performance? What were the highlights?
Well, I think, over the past 8 years, they've undergone a pretty significant shift.
Okay, so what kind of shift are we talking about?
They're focusing on what they call greater value for both society and shareholders. This sort of dual mandate approach.
So are they saying they're not just all about profits anymore?
That's the message.
Okay, so how is that actually playing out? What's the evidence?
Well, one interesting data point. Since 2016, they've achieved over 60% reduction in methane intensity.
Wow. Now, that is pretty impressive for an oil and gas giant.
Oh.
You don't usually hear those two things in the same sentence. Oil giant, emissions reductions. So where else did we see strong performance?
Well, their product solutions business, it was a standout. It's a real key driver in their improved earnings.
So what is this product solutions business exactly?
Well, it's not just the traditional drilling and pumping of oil. It's really about innovation, new products.
So what are these products? What makes them so successful?
It's a two-pronged strategy. One, strategically divesting what they consider non-strategic assets.
Okay.
And two, they're establishing new, what they call world-leading products.
Got it. So streamlining and innovation kind of working hand in hand.
Exactly, yeah.
Let's talk about Guyana. I keep hearing about Exxon's operations there.
Yeah, Guyana.
What's the story there?
It's a remarkable success story for ExxonMobil. Their operations there, they've achieved record production levels. It's considered the world's premier deepwater development. And what's really astonishing is the speed at which they've ramped up production.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How fast are we talking?
They went from discovery to producing 650,000 barrels per day in just 10 years.
10 years.
Which is unheard of for deep water.
Yeah.
These projects can take, decades to reach that.
That's incredibly fast. I'd imagine that this has a pretty good ripple effect on Guyana's economy as well.
Absolutely. Since production began in 2020, Guyana's GDP per capita has more than tripled.
Wow. That's talk about a win-win. Aside from Guyana, where else are we seeing these impressive growth numbers?
The Permian Basin,
Okay.
that's another area where they're really excelling. They've achieved record production there, leveraging their existing assets.
Okay.
And, of course, the assets that they acquired from Pioneer Natural Resources.
Right. That was a big move, that Pioneer acquisition. How has that been playing out for them?
Yeah, well, it seems to be paying off. It created some significant synergies. And they're actually projecting production growth up to 2.3 million barrels per day by 2030.
So that's a 50% increase.
Wow, 50% increase, that's huge. Now, we know it's not just all traditional oil and gas for Exxon anymore.
Right.
They've been making headlines for some, I'd say, intriguing plans for new areas. One that really caught my eye was their strategy to offer decarbonized power for data centers. Sounds pretty innovative.
It is, yeah.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, they're looking to tap into this booming demand for data centers.
Yeah.
Which is being driven by AI.
Right, of course.
And all these data-intensive technologies. But they're doing it with a twist.
Okay, so what's the twist?
They plan to leverage their expertise in carbon capture and storage to provide low-carbon energy solutions for these data centers.
So they're essentially creating a green data center solution. Do they see this as a real viable business opportunity?
Oh, they seem to be betting on it.
They've even said they believe they can bring decarbonized data centers online faster than anyone else, possibly by 2029?
2029. That's right around the corner.
Oh, that's very ambitious.
But if they pull it off, it could be a serious game changer for them.
Yeah.
And the whole industry, really.
Absolutely.
So it's not just this, though, right? They've got other new ventures.
Yeah.
What else are they up to?
They're venturing into things like proximal resin systems
Okay.
and carbon materials.
Now, before we get too far into the weeds here, I think we need to break down for our listeners what these things are. What exactly are proximal resin systems and carbon materials?
Well, you're right. Those are a little jargony.
Yeah.
Proximal resin systems are essentially a new way of making plastics,
Okay.
lighter, stronger, more recyclable. And carbon materials, that's kind of a wide range of applications.
Got it. So we're talking like advanced composites, energy storage, things like that.
Exactly, yeah.
Potentially big deals for them. But we can't forget the bigger picture here.
Right.
The energy landscape is constantly evolving. We have a new administration in the U.S. What policy changes are on the horizon that could impact ExxonMobil?
Well, it's definitely a factor. However, they've emphasized their commitment to decarbonization,
Oh, wait.
regardless of specific policies.
So no matter what, they're going to be pursuing this.
They believe government policy should focus on carbon intensity standards, on products, and remain technology agnostic.
Okay, so break that down for me a little bit. What does it actually mean?
Essentially, a level playing field
Yeah.
that encourages innovation across all technologies.
Okay, so not picking winners and losers, essentially.
Exactly.
Let's shift gears back to the financials for a minute. What's the outlook for ExxonMobil's growth and, more importantly, shareholder value?
Yeah, well, they're projecting some pretty impressive growth in earnings and cash flow by 2030, aiming for a 60% increase in production from what they call advantaged assets, and an 80% growth in sales of higher value products.
So, I mean, they're not messing around.
No.
Big moves, investing heavily in their traditional business, but also all these new growth areas. It's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely.
Now, before we get too carried away talking about earnings and growth, it's time for our favorite segment.
Oh, here we go.
This is not financial advice.
All right, are you ready for an outrageous but plausible trade idea?
Always.
Hit me. How about short oil futures? Based on the expectation that ExxonMobil's advanced recycling technologies and proximal products will rapidly disrupt traditional fuel markets, leading to a significant drop in oil demand.
Whoa. Okay, now that is a bold prediction.
Yeah.
You're suggesting that ExxonMobil, an oil giant, could actually contribute to the decline of oil demand.
It's a long shot, sure, I'll admit that. But think about the potential impact of these proximal resin systems. If they can create plastics that are truly recyclable and cost-effective, it could really revolutionize manufacturing and reduce our reliance on oil-based plastics.
And then their advanced recycling technologies. That could further reduce the need for virgin plastics, too.
Exactly. Imagine a world where plastic waste is effectively and economically recycled into new products.
Right.
It could significantly disrupt that demand for oil, which is, of course, a key feedstock for plastic production.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. It's a very provocative idea, to say
Yeah.
the least. But let's be very clear with our listeners. This is purely hypothetical, just for fun. We are not financial advisors. This is not investment advice.
Absolutely, not at all. No, this is just a thought experiment.
Yeah.
Exploring the potential implications of some of ExxonMobil's innovations.
Okay. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's shift gears a bit and take a closer look at some of the other key takeaways from this earnings call. One thing that really stood out to me was their emphasis on shareholder value. They seem very committed to delivering strong returns to investors.
Yeah, their track record definitely supports that commitment. Over the past 5 years, they've consistently outperformed other major oil companies in terms of cash flow growth, dividends and buybacks, total shareholder return.
It sounds like they've got a pretty solid strategy in place to continue this trend.
Yeah, they've outlined I'd say, multi-pronged approach, focusing on growing their portfolio of what they call advantaged assets, developing a more profitable product mix, becoming even more efficient in their operations, and ultimately, generating more earnings and cash flow.
They've even laid out specific targets, right?
They have. By 2030, they're aiming to have 60% of their upstream production coming from these advantaged assets, achieve 80% growth in sales of high-value products, and take an additional $6 billion in cost out of the business.
Ambitious goals, but they've definitely shown that they can execute.
Yeah.
One area that I find particularly interesting is their approach to, these new technologies and business ventures.
Yeah.
Like, they're not just dipping their toes in, are they? They're making some pretty significant investments in things like these proximal resin systems, carbon materials, decarbonized solutions for data centers.
It seems clear that they're really looking to position themselves as leaders in these emerging markets.
Yeah, it's a smart strategy.
Right.
Leveraging their existing expertise, infrastructure, they can potentially create all these new revenue streams that are less dependent on those volatile swings of commodity prices.
Absolutely.
And, they're not just throwing money at these new ventures. They've emphasized a stepwise approach.
Yes, very much so. focused on ensuring market success before they make these large-scale commitments,
Okay.
which, demonstrates a responsible and disciplined approach to innovation.
No, I don't think we can talk about ExxonMobil without addressing I guess you could say, the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
The energy transition. So how are they positioning themselves for a world that's increasingly moving toward these lower carbon energy sources?
Well, I think they're walking a tightrope, as are many companies in the energy sector.
Right.
On one hand, they're acknowledging the need for decarbonization. They're investing in solutions like carbon capture and storage, hydrogen, renewable diesel.
Right.
They're also advocating for those government policies that create a level playing field, encourage innovation.
But on the other hand, they're also being realistic about the continued role of oil and gas in the global energy mix, at least for the foreseeable future.
Exactly. They've been very vocal about the need for balanced energy policies that don't artificially discourage the production of oil and gas, which, they argue are still essential for economic growth and energy security.
It's complex.
It is, yeah.
There's no easy answers. ExxonMobil seems to be taking a pretty pragmatic and multifaceted approach to navigating this transition.
Yeah, definitely a balancing act. They have a vision, the resources to potentially play a really significant role in shaping the future of energy. But there are many challenges, uncertainties ahead, for sure.
It'll be interesting to see how this all plays out and how their strategy evolves in the coming years. But one thing that really struck me during this earnings call was their confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, it was palpable.
It was, yeah. Their leadership team, they really exuded this sense of optimism and belief in their strategy.
Yeah, they've done their homework.
Yeah.
And they're not afraid to make bold moves. That confidence, it's almost contagious. Speaking of bold moves, you ready for another round of This Is Not Financial Advice?
Always bring on the outrageous.
Okay, lay it on me.
Yeah.
What's today's outrageous but plausible trade idea?
How about this? ExxonMobil secretly develops a revolutionary battery technology
Okay.
that surpasses anything currently on the market,
All right.
allowing them to just dominate the EV market,
Oh.
become the next Tesla.
Wait, hold on. ExxonMobil, the oil giant, pivoting to batteries.
Yeah, oh, I know.
That sounds a little out there, even for us.
It's a wild one. But think about it. They have these vast resources, world-class research capabilities, and, they're motivated to diversify beyond fossil fuels.
Okay.
What if all this time they've been secretly working on this behind the scenes, waiting for the right moment to unveil their game-changing battery tech?
Okay, now that would be a plot twist.
Right.
I can see the headlines now. ExxonMobil shocks the world, unveils super battery. It's fun to imagine, but let's be real here, listeners. Remember, this is all hypothetical, for entertainment purposes only.
Of course.
We are not saying that ExxonMobil is about to become the next Tesla.
Not at all. No.
Just having some fun with it. All right, let's wrap up our deep dive into ExxonMobil's Q4 2024 earnings call. We've covered a lot of ground today, from their financial performance to their growth plans and even, some wild speculation.
It's been a journey.
It has been. So what are some of the key takeaways you think our listeners should really keep in mind?
Well, I think the big theme here is this: ExxonMobil is really walking this delicate line.
Right.
Right. They're a legacy energy giant, but operating in a world that's rapidly shifting towards cleaner energy. They're not shying away from the energy transition, but they're also not abandoning their core business.
Right.
It's a real balancing act, and it'll be really fascinating to see how they navigate these competing forces, I guess, in the years ahead.
It's like they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
They want to be seen as leaders in decarbonization, but still profiting from fossil fuels.
Exactly. And they're making these big investments in both, the traditional and lower carbon solutions.
Yeah.
They're hedging their bets, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And trying to position themselves to thrive in a variety of different future scenarios.
I think one area where they're clearly making a push is that decarbonizing data centers.
Absolutely.
It's a smart strategy. They can leverage their expertise, reduce emissions, and really boost their, environmental image.
It's a win-win for them, really.
Yeah, for sure. Their success in Guyana, I think, is also something to keep an eye on. It's a reminder that there are still opportunities for growth in traditional oil and gas, particularly in these, frontier regions.
Yeah, for sure. And they've proven they can execute these really complex projects at a massive scale.
Right.
That expertise is going to be invaluable as they move into these new areas like the proximal resin systems.
So we've got a company in transition, trying to straddle the old and the new. What's your overall assessment of their prospects?
Well, I think they have the potential to be a major player in the energy landscape for, decades to come. Clear vision, strong track record, the resources to make these bold moves. But they've also got some significant challenges ahead of them, from regulations to consumer preferences.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is. Only time will tell if they can truly navigate this complex and rapidly changing environment.
Well said. That's a perfect note to end on, I think. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into ExxonMobil's Q4 2024 earnings call. It's been a fascinating look into the world of big oil, the challenges and opportunities of this energy transition.
Thanks for joining us.
Be sure to subscribe to Talk Tickers for more in-depth analysis of earnings calls and market trends. Until next time, happy investing.